let's look at hip extension today. What is hip extension? I'm going to come into camel pose first. So when we are lifting the front of the hips up, bringing the thigh bone back in the hip socket, this is hip extension. Don't confuse that with spinal extension. So yes, I could lean back further by back bending in the lumbar spine, but if I keep my spine pretty neutral, press my hips forward and let my thigh bone come back in the hip socket, this opening and lengthening in the front of the hips is hip extension. It's probably better seen in a low lunge. So when I bring my hips forward, lift the front of the hips up and allow this leg to come behind my hip, hip extension, whereas this hip is in flexion. So let's look at what are the limitations to hip extension. Firstly, you might feel it as tension in the front side. So tension in the hip flexors, the quadriceps, might prevent you from going further or deeper into hip extension. And that is something that you could potentially improve with time and practice through stretches, psoas release, that kind of thing. Lengthening of the tissues and the muscles on the front side of the hip. But if you feel the limitation in the back side of the hip, that's likely to be compression. So what I actually feel is it feels like my thigh bone can't get any further back because the thigh bone is jammed up against my buttocks. So it could be flesh on flesh compression like that. It could also be really deep in the hip socket where thigh bone is hitting into the hip socket that is preventing me from getting this leg any further back. So if it's compression, it's hard to tell. It could be that limit of one thing hitting the next thing. It could also be that it's a lack of strength in my hamstrings and glutes, which are extensor muscles. That's what brings this leg back behind me. So I could improve the strength of those to improve my extension. But if it is that bone-on-bone compression or flesh-on-flesh compression, then that's something I just have to practice. Acceptance. So I hope that's helped, and I'll see you on the next video.